ahead and get started. But it's two of y'all in here, so here's the thing. Let me ask this. Is there anything in particular you all would like to know or discuss regarding preaching, technology, digital discipleship? Both of you and most of you are already doing the work. So I would love to be able to just talk specifically to what it is you need or want to hear about, but definitely engage me in the chat. And do know I'm not offended or would not be offended if you needed to go to another discussion to handle anything around that. So Tristan, Sally, what's going on? What's good? What's good? We're just gathering for a few moments, while I'm sitting here trying to figure out. Good morning, good morning. Gail, how are you? Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. There we go. Let's see. That's good. That's good. Perfect. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning. Giving people a few more moments to just join us in the room today. Join us. Join us in the room today. Cool. All right, I'm gonna give you like one more minute, then we're gonna go ahead and get started. But listen, go ahead and drop your name, your city, wherever you at, so people know where you are. I know some people are doing some networking, so go ahead and share that if you want to. I love some conversation around balancing the need to be prophetic when things happen in the national landscape versus church center. Yes, okay, cool. Teaching multi-generational members at different levels. I love this. Okay, for those of you who are joining the room, the thing that I've asked you all to do is share with me some conversation pieces that you want to make sure we cover in our time together. One of my focus or foci or passions as an educator is to ask my students, what are they looking for? What do they need? And that for me helps me to be able to teach specifically to the need or to the point. And so again, wherever you are, please share. What is it something that you're looking at you want to learn? We see that Pastor Joshua Mitchell, I said, I love some conversation around balancing the need to be prophetic when things happen on the national landscape versus chasing every headline. Absolutely. Come on, Pine Grove, Louisiana. Yolanda Lowe. I live in Shreveport, Louisiana. I don't know how far that is from me, but that's where I live. Yolanda Lowe has also shared teaching to multi-generational members at different learning levels. Man, that's something very, very serious, very serious. Yes. Go ahead and drop where you're from, where you're serving. Y'all hear my serious? Drop where you're from, where you're serving, and if there's anything in particular you want to look to learn while we are in our session together. So let me start off by sharing with you. My name is Reverend Dr. Dominique Aisha Robinson. And no, my name isn't Dr. or Reverend. My name is Dominique Aisha Robinson. I am ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. I earned my doctorate of ministry from Columbia Theological Seminary, and I'm currently in a PhD program, on African American preaching and sacred rhetoric, where I am focusing again on preaching and sacred rhetoric around Black church preaching tradition. And so part of this research that I'm going to share with you is coming from an experience or my study that I had during my D-Min program for several years. I now live in Shreveport, Louisiana, serving as the Dean of Chapel at Wiley College. However, before relocating to Marshall, Texas, and to Shreveport, Louisiana, I served as a children's, youth, young adult, and executive pastor at about 7 congregations and churches in the metro Atlanta area for a span of 12 years. And so while I was doing that, one of the difficulties I had was preaching or teaching specifically to Black millennials. And so I'm going to share with you the research that I found while attempting to put theory to my practice, or what I've discovered now as an educator and administrator, that this same research is certainly applicable for pedagogy, how we're teaching persons, but particularly in a digital age, despite a person's age. And so I wanted to introduce myself to you, let you all know what it is, who I am, what I'm presenting to you. And again, one of the questions that I've presented to you all is, what is something you want to make sure we discuss in our time together? Because that will help us navigate our time together to make sure I'm meeting the points of your needs or some questions that you certainly have. I am a person who loves to be engaged. So wherever you are, if you are engaging in the chat, I'm going to rock with you. I got friends in the chat, so I appreciate them being in the room with us. Tristan Sally was good. Joshua Mitchell was good. And we got people, Yolanda Lowe, Gail Gilly. Hope I said your last name right. If I didn't, put it phonetically in the box for me and I'll get it together. Jacksonville, Florida in the building. Nuggets to share with pastors within the presiding elder district. Yes, I'm assuming you are Black and Methodist because the way you're like presiding elder district, I got you. And so what we will learn today are a few things. One, we're going to learn about social media platforms, which I'm sure you don't really need to know so much about that. We're going to learn a little bit about the generational breakdowns of younger persons that we're dealing with. We will also learn, yes, presiding elder with the AME Church. Yeah, praise the Lord. I'm an honorary AME, just so you know. Even though I'm ordained AME Zion, I am an honorary AME. Just ask Bishop Sam Green. Thank you, Sally. I'm AME. Thank you very much. And so we will also address methodology for engaging people on a social media platform so that you aren't doing all the work. Pastor Zacharias, big brother in the building from John Wesley AME Zion Church in DC, Chocolate City, looking for preaching that connects the multi-generations and engages them to further mature in Christ. Awesome. So it sounds like you all are looking to find ways to use social media platforms in the field of preaching for digital discipleship. And so that's what we're going to say. Born AME, now AMEZ. I got you. All right. So we got Black Methodists in the room. Appreciative of you all. Thank you for being in the building. So that is what we will learn today, what we will go through. What you all will be going through with me is a work that I call iHomiletic. iHomiletic is a term that I've coined. I learned that Apple did not own the I. So iHomiletic is a contemporary communication method using technology and social media linguistics. Basically saying we're using all platforms. There's no social media platform off limits for how we can actually teach and preach and connect with people for digital discipleship. But we're using social media linguistics, meaning the language of the day. That's what we will be doing. In light of that, then we have to ask ourselves what's going on, because I believe that preaching has to be radically contextual, which will speak to that question you asked Pastor Mitchell about without chasing headlines, making sure we're addressing some things that are going on in society. So first of all, when we're talking about things that are going on in society right now, the first thing I wrote down was confusion. God knows we are trying to figure out what is going on. Is the pandemic over? Where are the vaccinations? Racial injustices. And even after such an amazing day yesterday, the truth is, yes, we were encouraged. Yes, we were inspired. Yes, we were excited. But we also know that there's still the disease of racism, the disease of elitism, the disease of capitalism still exists. And so while we are finding some sort of bombs in Gilead, right, that there are still many issues that are existing. So you got confusion. Drugs, recreational drugs are becoming a coping mechanism nowadays. Sex, hopefully that slowed down a bit with COVID-19 and people not just swapping bodily fluids, but sex is out there. We're talking about the younger generation where sex and sexuality and gender identification is fluid. It's, I wouldn't say that it's, so to speak, new, but it's certainly more prevalent. And now people are more comfortable having the conversation. So you have to know that that's a part of it. You got pop culture, music, the role of the church or lack of the church. You got school and this online education and instruction is difficult in this season. We have the line of poverty shifting where more people are struggling with poverty because of having lost their jobs and streams of income during the pandemic. You have children having children. You got children also more so in that college age group who have become adults and main sources of income for their households. Obviously, we have police brutality as a people of color, and they got image, how you present yourself. And right now, image has become such a strong element of person's persona and presentation because everyone has gone online. So it's about what we present, how we present, if it's relatable, how people can connect with it. So image is now impacting so many people. As I told you, my research is based off of millennials, but I know that we have so many other generations that we're talking about. And again, the practices that I give us, while they were focused on reaching millennials, which I identify as a Black millennial and a Black preacher. So the research that I did was for helping myself to be able to connect better with God for myself, or be able to connect with, quote unquote, who the younger generation was. This research was done between the years of 2013 to 2017. I had been doing the work, like I told you all, but the intentional ethnographic research was done between 2013 2017. Well over 3,000 surveys, interviews, observations. I'm grateful because so many really of the AME and AME Zion churches allowed me, when I came to preach, to survey their young people, to ask questions. And so it was important to be able to get the feedback so that I would know what it is and how we're trying to reach individuals. So millennials, you see, is a large umbrella for those who were born in the 1980s to the early 1990s. And you have Gen Zs, mid to late 1990s to 2010s. And then you have the Alpha generation, the current youngest generation right now, the Alpha generation. What's significant to know about the differences between these generations is the role of imagination. What do I mean by that? For those of you who are listening to me, hear me when I tell you the role of imagination is significant. I argue that millennials are the last normal generation. We were the generation who we got a second phone line in the house. We were still able to knock on our neighbors' doors and play outside. We had to create games. If everybody wasn't able to play double dutch, we tied a rope to a gate. We played double dutch. We read books like the Boxcar Children and Goosebumps, and we were able to imagine the monsters, right? We still played the video games. We shot the duck and it would just disintegrate. We didn't really know what happened. There was no blood. But then generations later, their imagination was stunted because the books that they read, if they even read the book, they didn't have to linger so much on imagining. We got Presbyterian in the house. Hey, how you doing? Floretta, Barbie, Watkins Presbyterian Church USA. Oh, yeah, Presbyterian. Hey, executive for teacher. I served at Columbia Theological Seminary for about 5 years, so I'm very acquainted with the Presbyterian Church. And actually, part of my research includes one of a Presbyterian church in Atlanta, Georgia, New Life Presbyterian Church, where Billy Michael Honor was the pastor when I was serving there. And so the role of imagination with these generations, how that changes is then when books were written, movies were produced, just like that. Movies were produced, characters were given. So you got the Hunger Games, you got Harry Potter. So these young persons didn't have to imagine the characters because they were easily given to them. How and why does that matter to faith development? When we're talking about preaching and teaching about a God they cannot see or we cannot see, we are talking to individuals who did not have to even imagine characters. And so because of that, their imagination is stunted. And imagination is so key to faith development because faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. Therefore, the role of imagination to be able to see beyond one's current circumstances is so significant to faith that is certainly needed when we are preaching and teaching. Because we are preaching and teaching to generations whose faith and imagination have been stunted because the creativity, and some people argue that with the use of social media technology, that this generation has become the most creative generation. And maybe so, but they're not the most resilient and imaginative generation. We are talking about a generation where everybody participated in the soccer game and even the losing team got trophies. So they don't know what it is to hear a no, to experience a rejection letter. They don't have the resiliency to bounce back from a no, which is so important for the tradition of Black church and for faith because we, as our new vice president said, she eats no for breakfast. So being able to bounce back from a no, it's who we are, that resiliency isn't shaken. So we're preaching a process theological perspective of God to people who haven't had to sit and process what it means for my circumstance to be outside of this, what I'm experiencing right now. All I see is what's right in front of me. And I know that has had to be a crazy challenge during the pandemic because all we see in front of us is death. All we see in front of us is illness. All we see in front of us is a shift, a change that has triggered depression and anxiety in ways that we could not even imagine. And yet we are still called to offer hope and to preach to individuals, to let them know that this won't last always, which sounds good, but it always doesn't feel good. And you can't always grasp that in light of what people are seeing. So when we're talking about the different generations, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the alphas, the role of imagination is crazy significant. And so, and let's be clear, while we can speak about these different generations with a specificity around the years in which they were born, the truth is there are many adults, grown people in their 50s and 60s with millennial mentalities and alpha generation mentalities who are just looking for a microwave quick fix. And that's just not how things work and how things go. So we're talking about these generations. Also, we're talking about the landscape of social media. And I clearly, obviously didn't update my presentation, it should say in 2021. But you all see some of the mainline social media platforms that are being used. One of the things that I want to highlight is that when we start to count the number of social media platforms, the actual language, meaning if your keyboard is in another language, then it becomes another platform. So the truth of the matter is we're well over several thousands of platforms of social media. So as we use Facebook, if I'm using Facebook with the English platform, someone else is using Facebook with a Spanish, keyboard, someone else is using it with a Korean keyboard, then now Facebook becomes 3 different platforms versus one being that of Facebook. And so as we look at the landscape of social media right now, we recognize that there's been a shift in who engages in social media. At one point, you can identify different generations who engage with different particular social media platforms. Now, because everybody had to move to a digital and online experience, persons all across the board of various ages are all on various social media platforms. The most popular social media platform right now for younger persons is that of TikTok. TikTok will take you down a rabbit hole, as you all probably know. Well, so will Facebook and so will Instagram. One of the other things to highlight is this: people are no longer looking for words, no longer looking for phrases. They are looking for imagery and video. Why is that important for those of us who are teaching and preaching? You have to ask yourself the question, what would this look like? What would this look like if I couldn't say many words and I had to create an image, a video of the sermon and the theological claim I'm attempting to make? What would that look like? And that's why that's important for us as we are trying to shape our lessons and our sermons, trying to develop and engage individuals. So, of course, we know the use of technology is not new. The tension has always been real. People have wondered whether or not iPads or the use of other things are necessary in our worship experience. But what we know is this: social technology has always been a part of our worship experience, whether it was the microphone, the sound system, the instruments, the printing of programs, now with streaming. But technology has always been a part of who we were in the church. But the use of technology sometimes allows us, there's a loss to the use of technology in our worship experience. There's a loss of incarnational teaching and preaching, a loss of our humanity, a loss of a sense of community, and a loss of growth and depth. So let's go back to a loss of incarnational preaching and teaching. Listen, in the Black church, we are in a cacophony of a conversation between the preacher, the people, and God. W.E.B. Du Bois says the preaching, the music, and the frenzy. And so there's that element, that grit. There's something that you just feel that is experiential. And with technology, sometimes we lose that incarnational feeling because we're not literally in each other's presence. There's something about being able to know when to move on, when to stay and linger on something, because you can feel the atmosphere. You can see the faces of individuals. And now that we are preaching directly to cameras, we now have to imagine and kind of rethink what people might be saying or doing or thinking while they're listening. You have to, if you grew up like me preaching to your stuffed animals on the radiator, then you just feel like you're preaching to your stuffed animals again. But you got to remember, they were preaching to people who are tuning in and don't have to stay. So what are we saying to keep them engaged? The loss of humanity through the use of technology. We now know that people will say whatever they want to say behind a computer. We call them keyboard cowards. They'll say and do whatever they want to do behind a keyboard, but they won't say and do those things actually in person. The loss of the sense of community. There's just something about walking into the church, being able to see Mother so-and-so. You might not ever talk to her, but knowing that Mother so-and-so is a staple to the worship experience, and you know how she responds to the preacher, whether the preacher is doing well, right? If they say that's all right, then we got some issues. If you say keep going, there's some things that are blessing you. And so, there's something about that sense of community. Now, some would argue that the use of technology stunts growth and depth. I actually disagree with that. I think that it can be used, but again, technology is both a weapon and a tool based on how we use it and engage it. So there is a loss of growth, meaning people don't study as deeply as they used to because they can just click it and find it. And the depth in which we are looking to do now, we're just replicating whatever it is we see. And so we want to be mindful, though, with the use of technology, that we are still using it to study in depth and to grow spiritually. Again, there are gains to the use of technology. So to speak to something someone brought up in the chat, there's a gain of cultural knowledge. We learn things about stuff across the world that we would not have learned as quickly, that can play a role in our preaching moment that people and people are experiencing. So we're able to speak directly to so many things at the same time. So the gain of cultural knowledge. You gain attending to various learning styles. I believe somebody mentioned in the chat when I asked what are some of the things you want to make sure we talk about. The use of technology certainly allows us to gain attending to various learning styles. People can now see, they can now hear, they can now share and engage, tactile, and so the use of technology allows us to meet people at various needs and learning styles as teachers and preachers. We gain a wider educational reach. Now, listen, that's not always comfortable. I was so accustomed to preaching specifically to the congregation at Wiley College. I'm talking to college-aged individuals and some faculty and staff members in the room. But now, because we have a wider reach of who's listening, we are preaching to everybody. And so now you have to almost start saying, I'm preaching to this context. And if you are eavesdropping, that's cool. And if it doesn't reach you where you want it to reach you, that's cool too, because I'm preaching to these people. And so, being able to understand that you cannot reach everybody, but you have to be really clear of the fact that everybody certainly is watching. You have the gaining of a virtual community. Now this adds to what I call the gaining of accountability. You cannot just say and do whatever you want to say and do, because if you're wrong, people will call you out. If you're sexist and chauvinistic, if you're elitist and capitalistic, if your flyers have all men, people will call you out on it. There's a gain of a virtual community that has no problem checking you when you need to be checked, but also you got to remember there's a generation looking up to you who's looking to duplicate what you're doing. So that gaining of accountability means we have to start reapproaching how we do things, presenting them, and a gaining of accountability. And again, for me, I told you previously, that I believe that the use of social media and technology is the gaining of growth and depth as we grow spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in so many ways, particularly in a season where mental health is a priority. Now people are able to see therapists online. People who weren't even seeing therapists in person are now tapping in to making sure that they are well mentally to be able to serve the people of God. And so the gaining of social media and technology is important. Now, the other thing is this. When I talked about the use of social media and linguistics, what I was talking about was nothing new. Jesus Christ preached parables in the New Testament, using the language of the day to reach the people of the day. And so when I say that we use social media linguistics, I'm saying we are literally using the language of the day, the trending message, the words that people are using that mean something, colloquialisms, sayings of the culture that allow us to connect with people, and really using it in such a way that they can use it as hashtags to share what it is that you are preaching and teaching. So we talked about the gain, the losses of social media and technology as we are using it in our preaching moment. I'm going to pause to ask, are there any questions before I move further into in-depth more of the iHomiletic method? Any questions from anybody? Okay. So iHomiletic is about preaching truth, enlightening minds, inspiring a generation. I am very clear that iHomiletic is not a brand new spanking a method of Black preaching. It is an expansion of Black preaching. And I do believe that Black preaching in Black church tradition is the intersectionality of homiletics and social justice, making sure that we reach and preach to the needs of our people, but our community. We are a very special people of God. We can identify with the children of Israel being persecuted for nothing, right? Simply because of the color of our skin. And it seems like the more we are oppressed, the more we multiply. The more we are killed, or the more that we are jailed, the more we fight. Justice rises up in us. We saw yesterday a wonderful display of Black excellence during the inauguration. And I don't just mean that of the vice president, but I mean, there was no way to even address or engage the rhetoric around the celebration of Black excellence if we did not include, of course, Michelle Obama showing up in her fine outfit, right? And her fine husband. But also, you have the Black young poet, and then the fire chief who did the Pledge of Allegiance while she was doing sign language, right? And then the woman who swore Vice President Harris in making history. And so when we start talking about the intersectionality between justice and preaching and teaching, we then have to start realizing that it's not just one thing, one person, one issue. It's all multifaceted, and there's so many different webs that we have to be mindful of. And when you're doing this type of preaching, particularly social justice preaching, you cannot do it all. You will experience justice fatigue. So remembering to remain passionate about a particular idea does not mean you have to bring it up in every preaching moment. And be clear, doesn't mean that you have to use social media and technology for every preaching moment either. But while you were here, let's talk about then, how do you effectively engage the iHomiletic? Wherever you are, if you would do me a favor, I'm looking to see if it's a good question. Wherever you are, do me a favor. Think about what type of sources you use to prepare your sermons. What are the sources you use to prepare your sermons? And then what are some things that inspire you for the sermonic moment? Sources. Hello, Bernice Lohman, MBA, thank you for joining us. What are some sources you all can share in the chat? What are some sources you use for your sermon preparation? And then what are some sources of inspiration for your sermonic development? For me, watching any Black documentary inspires me. I am looking forward to watching One Night in Miami this week to help me get in the mind frame of my Black History Month sermon series. I enjoy funny things, so I'm looking forward to watching Yearly Departed to be able to get in the place and mindset to kind of laugh and do some writing. And as far as resources, I encourage us to start using resources that are written by us, Black scholars. New Testament commentary, Old Testament commentary, womanist commentary, queer commentary, to be able to start using sources that are outside of ourselves, to hear the voices of other persons as they engage our work, as they engage our sermons, so that we can make sure we are connecting with people in a way that they can start seeing the Bible particularly directly connected to their life. And so when we start talking about engaging, executing, embodying, and experiencing discernment, all right, so you engage. As you are engaging, you are not just engaging the scripture, but you are engaging your people. Thank you, Christopher Zacharias, Faith Life, formerly Logos, Watching Theater, other preachers, usage of spoken word and poetry, sources, people, commentaries, Bible, other books, yes, movies. I use personal stories, classical commentaries, and relevant articles. Yes, thank you. And nowadays, us having to be out in public and, walking a little bit more. I mean, I've got so many examples from just nature, just walking through one image that has really been inspiring me for my own personal grief journey that I've been experiencing. Is I keep walking past this patch near my apartment of these flowers that are growing in between concrete. And I know we've always, seen those pictures in Imagery, but it seems like every time I walk by, there's a new bud, a new sprout. And I have to always remember then that, it's good to know that no matter how difficult experiences and circumstances are, that God still gives us space to grow, that there's still resiliency to move. And despite the rain that hits the concrete, the people walking by, that there's some goodness, some flower, moving by. I get motivated by spending time with young people and watching cartoons. Yeah, cartoons, traveling, sports, lectures, James Cone, logos, commentaries, yes. And Tristan, Sally, and I we also can testify, call another preacher and be like, what you think about this text? Helps us being in conversation. Come on, every time I walk by, there's a new bud. Yeah, Joshua, something's like, or at least I notice it, right? So maybe it really was there 2 days ago, but I didn't see it that time, and I'm seeing it this time. And so, moving between eyesight, insight, and foresight has been amazing for me in this time in this journey. And then, exploring cultural and African practices connected to our Christianity has been so helpful for me. Those who know me knows that I have experienced a great amount of loss in my family as a result of COVID-19. And so I am in the midst of building an ancestral altar and living out the text of the great cloud of witnesses, opening myself to be guided by those who have become ancestors. We talk about it, but doing it is so different, opening ourselves. And it doesn't mean necessarily worshiping people or ancestors, but being open to hear and know. And so I'm not saying that they quote unquote always speak to me, but there are moments that I'm reminded of. I would ask myself, instead of, what would Jesus do, but what would my grandmother say to this? How would my godfather respond to this? Allows me to ponder on what I believe their actions would be and being guided by those ancestors. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but y'all know what I'm talking about. And so engaging and exegeting. So not only do we engage the text, but we engage our people, right? Which moves us to exegete. So we exegete the text, but we also are exegeting our context, the people in which we are ministering to. Executing it, this is something I've done with many of you all before. Wherever you are, draw a lowercase letter I in the air for me, a lowercase letter I, wherever you are, draw it. If you draw, go ahead. If you drew it with your hand, go ahead and drop the lowercase letter I for me in the chat. Just drop the lowercase letter I for me in the chat. Drawing the lowercase letter I in the chat. There we go. Just let me know you drew it. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so with execution, what does that mean? Oftentimes, people draw their lowercase letter I with their stem and then their dot. The iHomiletic argues this. What's up, Martinique? The iHomiletic argues this. Give me the dot. Make it so powerful and impactful that I'm going to follow you with the rest of the stem. So that is the actual execution and embodiment of the preaching moment. What am I saying to Black preachers? That it don't take all day. We don't want to sit for a 2-hour worship service no more. Your worship service literally really needs to be 45 minutes to an hour if we're going to sit and watch you. Give us something that is significant for us to hear what it is you're saying, right? And not just the preaching moment, right? Make everything so engaging. Make sure the songs are impactful and done with excellence. Make sure even the reading of the scripture and whatever else you're sharing and reading, that it's impactful. We don't want to sit all day and hear you lining the hymn and going through the rituals. We want to experience God. People are dying left and right. We want to enter into the courts. You hear me? And enter into the gates, and we want to hear what God is doing. So as preachers and pastors, you have to start asking yourself, what are the elements of my worship that are absolutely necessary? What's absolutely necessary? And how do I cut the rest of it out? Is it necessary? Yes, a call to worship. Bring us into a centering space. But is it necessary to read the entire Decalogue right now? Is it necessary to have a responsive reading? Is it necessary? There's so many things that you ask yourself the question, are all these things particularly necessary? Floretta, I know that you are my moderator. I see something in the queue. I don't know what that means. So if you can tell me what that means, I'll be able to respond to it accordingly. But it's a beginning again to ask ourselves the question of what does it take for executing and embodying. Now, when I go to experience, what do I mean by that? If you are sharing online your worship experience and people are tuning into you and they are responding to your actual preaching moment via text messaging and comment, not necessarily text messaging, but commenting and sharing, I think it is our duty as preachers and pastors to go back and respond to people's comments. Go back and at least click like, let them know you appreciate that they've even tuned in and engaged you, and ask some questions, create some dialogue. Make sure people know that you care about what it is that they are saying and engaging you. Because again, they don't have to do it. But even in doing so, if part of your pedagogy, your teaching, your preaching is to make people think and wonder, it's not just about the call and response of affirmation, but what did this text make you think about? What did I say theologically that made you rethink about who God is? Share that. And that helps you go back and you respond to it. But you know what else it will do for you as a preacher? Help you shape your next sermon. Because your people will tell you what it is they need to hear, would like to hear. How vulnerable would it be for us as preachers and teachers to put out there and ask our people, what do you want to hear? What do you need to hear? Where are the lessons you're looking to learn? Because that one stretches us, because we're so used to doing things a particular way. January is going to be about new beginnings of Martin Luther King. We're going to do a Black History Month theme. March is about women's history, and we're already in the Lenten season. April is about Easter. May is about Mother's Day, and the end of the academic year. We're going to take June is about the end of the year for those who are up north. Your school ends in June. July is respite month, so we're not going to do anything. And August is revamping, starting all over again. In September, y'all hear what I'm saying? And we go right into Thanksgiving and Halloween and not Halloween, but y'all know Advent and programming again for Christmas and things of that nature. What happens if you just pause for a moment and you actually survey your people and ask them, what do you need? What do you want to hear about? First of all, that stretches us as a preacher, right? It makes us vulnerable. It pushes us for what we're going to be studying. And you know what else it helps us do? Maybe it's not always us. Maybe we need to bring another preacher or teacher in to address something that's very real and important. I want to share with you as an educator and administrator, we have students who are home who are dealing with a lot. Homelessness, instabilities in the household, individuals who are at school who were able to be their full selves with gender identification and sexuality, but yet they're back home in a place that's not safe. So what happens when you start teaching on sexuality and gender identification? What happens when you start teaching about God and God's love of inclusivity? Or what happens when you start teaching on that to help people to reconcile in their household? What happens when you start teaching on conflict resolution since people are now stuck at home and talking to each other? What happens when you start teaching on dealing with depression and not super spiritualizing it? What happens when you start talking about the mental health issues that people had in the Bible, whether it was anxiety or depression or schizophrenia or being bipolar? I mean, God, If we read the Psalter, David was up and down all the time. Did David have multiple personalities? When you read the Old Testament and you go through all of these prophets, every single one of them had some sort of mental and emotional distress. I mean, running in caves, crying all the time, shaving their hair, ripping their clothes off. What happens when we start preaching those texts? What happens when we start talking about people who aren't able bodies, the woman who was bent over, the one with the crumbs that fell from the master's table? What happens when we start talking about the persistence of the widow, when we start pushing ourselves beyond the canons that we've studied and become comfortable with, when we start asking our people, what do you want to hear? The question that I tend to ask my young adults at Wiley College, and for those that I'm preaching to, is if you could ask God one question, what would that question be? That helps me to start shaping sermons to be able to engage what it is people want to hear, because our goal is for them to grow. Our goal is not for them just to say amen. Our goal is for them to grow. So what happens when we start saying, what do you need? Or what's going on in your life? Here's another thing I want to share about the experience and follow-up. Not only do you go and you engage individuals, but what happens with you as a pastor if you hold a sermon talk back immediately after the service? After the sermon, a live platform, and maybe not even streaming live, but a closed Zoom room where people can ask you questions about your sermon. I can guarantee you those conversations will spark new ideas about what to preach next, what to teach next, your next teaching series. And so when we start talking about iHomiletic, it gives the experience of your listeners and your congregants authority in your sermon development. Yes, a virtual fellowship hall. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But a little bit more in depth. If you have a moderator who's asking you questions, Pastor, where'd you get that perspective? How'd you land on that? And not just good, we heard that it blessed me. No. Some real critical questions as to where we got that. And again, it's a challenge, and being okay with saying, you know what, I don't know, I'll go back and revisit it. And so being able to have that question. I am a womanist theologian, and so coming from a womanist perspective, the experience of the woman is authoritative enough to say that God didn't say this. What happens when we give the people of God we're teaching and preaching to the authority to say, my experience is enough for my pastor to meet me at the point of my need? So engaging, exegeting, executing, embodying, and experiencing. How do we do that? In the iHomiletic, I'm talking about how you make things sleek, compact, concise, user-friendly, and always ready for an upgrade. One of the things that I love about Apple devices is that you can't get a virus, or you should not. You should not be able to get a virus on your things. And so being able to always ready for an upgrade, but not susceptible to a virus. But what's important about that is this. As we develop our preaching and teaching, we have to stay in the presence of God. Why am I saying that? Apple devices work most effectively when they are connected with other Apple accessories. When we start to stray away from the very true essence and the relationship we have with God, then we start using bootleg accessories to charge us, and we're unable to function appropriately. When we are going and running on E and not fully upgrading who we are, our prayer life, our practices, our studies, then we will not function properly. The thing about the iHomiletic is being able to be sleek, meaning attractive, where people want to engage with it is you're preaching because it's current and it's relevant. Compact, meaning that it's one place. I don't need to click all these places to get the word. You're giving it to me straight, just like it is. Concise, meaning that it's short to the point. I can get to it. User-friendly, meaning it's somewhere, it's so applicable that it's on my homepage of my device. But always ready for an upgrade is where I think we have a challenge as Black preachers. We start to do and rely on the crutch, how we preach. The same format, the same way, the same opening, the same protocol, the same close. What happens being ready for an upgrade, being stretched so that God can use us in ways that are different, but yet uncomfortable and still effective. Apple has a way of the moment your device is completely old and dated, it starts giving you all types of problems, and it forces you to get a new device. I don't know if I have anybody on the line who can testify to that eventually you have to get the newer device because your phone, your Apple, your iPad, it's not working anymore. It's because you stopped allowing the new software that is being produced. It cannot function on the device that you have because it doesn't have the space to hold, the memory to hold the updates. All I'm saying to us is that we have to start stretching ourselves in such a way that we are able to receive the new software and devices and download that God has for us is being stuck in doing it our way. Upgrade is always necessary. But I don't mean just upgrading in the way you preach. When's the last time you upgraded your theology? When's the last time you wrestled with where do I land on capital punishment, on abortion, on murder? Where do I land on allowing the rapist back into my congregation? Where do I land on biracial relationships? Where do I really land on women in leadership as preachers and pastors and prophets? Where do I land on you got to ask yourself, where do I land on gender identification? Do I believe that being transgender is the work or permissible by God? Where do I land on queer relationships? Where do I land on performing gay marriages? Where do I land? You have to start asking yourself theologically, what are my own convictions? But then how do we teach and preach to people when we're not clear on our own convictions, or honest, at least to be able to say it's complex and at times quite contradictory? Where, particularly for those of us who serve in these denominations that have expectations or things in writing that might not line up with our personal convictions. That's all. So I'm just asking, where are we on updating our theological perspectives? Being always able to grow and learn in stature and wisdom. And so being sleek, compact, concise, user-friendly, always ready for an upgrade is a part of the iHomiletic experience. This is an exercise that I usually would give people. What I will do is encourage you to go on Twitter and follow my iHomiletic page, which you will find are different tweets from exercises, and you will ask yourself the question this: what was the theological claim? What was the subject? What was the scripture? And you'll be able to see that people were able to tweet in less than 140 characters. Now you can do more than 140 characters, and they had tweetable sermons. If that is the case, then you know we don't have to take all day to preach and to give people the word of God. Here's some pillars I want you to know as you are considering your online ministry is visibility. What is your marketing looking like? Do people see your ministry? Do people see how to connect with you? Accessibility. How do we connect with you? Predictability is consistency. We are living in a day and time where things are all over the place, and consistency is certainly one of the things we are desperately in the need of. So predictability, you do this every Thursday. It's every Sunday at this time. It's every Friday night. It's every Monday afternoon. So visibility, accessibility, predictability, vulnerability. People want to know how we as faith leaders are surviving this season. And that honesty and vulnerability is important, because when people can identify with us, they can learn from us even better. And so that puts a challenge on us, which moves to that level of accountability. When do we need to take a break? When do we need to practice Sabbath? When do we need to see a therapist? When do we need to call a friend to come and preach for us? We can't keep running on E thinking it's only about us, that the vitality of the ministry will only function if we are doing it. But if we are not well, we cannot do ministry well. And so that's about that community then, right? So we're trying to develop a community. Who are the people that we can trust to do the work that's needed in our context until we are well enough to get back to that space and that place? Or who's the community that can keep us accountable to take care of ourselves so that we can be who God has called us to be as faith leaders? And again, we're doing this so that we can offer radical hospitality. We are no longer preaching and teaching within the four walls, but to any and everybody. I want to be the type of faith leader where a Buddhist, a Jew, a Muslim wants to come to my church service, wants to come to my platform and hear what God is telling me, because it's applicable to them, because my words and my language is not excluding them from what God is saying. And so I'm going to stop right there, because what I want to do is go back and address some of the questions that you all shared at the very beginning of the conversation. So please, if you have any questions, things that you specifically want to talk about, here's our time to have some dialogue. I want you all to talk to each other, because we as a community are resources to each other. And so I want to share some resources. First of all, the Women's Bible Commentary. You want to get that. There is a queer commentary, Bible commentary. You want to get that as well. Listen, you might not believe in it, but I can tell you what, there's some fresh revelation of some scripture if you really take some time to read it. You may never use it, but for your own study time, just read it. I definitely challenge us to get some reading up on the commentaries by Shiley Smith, Raquel Letson, Renita Weems, Will Gaffney. And for those of you who are looking for ethical ways to engage, Dr. Marcia Riggs is so dope, and she gives us amazing resources. So I'm going to share that. For those of you who are looking on how to engage with Black millennials, let me tell you a couple people you want to check out. Joshua Mitchell, Breonna Parker, Bobby Hampton, all have published work around how to engage millennials. And Al Holly, he specifically talks about entry points of millennials for ministry, which I think work for all of us. Let's talk for a moment about what it means to preach the word of God in a Black church context, being culturally relevant. Joshua Mitchell brought this up, but not chasing headlines. One, not super spiritualizing it, is to make sure we are in our prayer closet. The question is, God, what do your people need to hear? But at the same time, you do not want to be irresponsible with the pulpit by not addressing what's going on in society to at least give people some guidance and make the word practical. So you certainly don't want to chase every headline. But for me, the question is this impacting my local community? Is this impacting my local community? That is a challenge for me at Wiley College because my students live across the entire nation. And so while the wildfires in California are impacting maybe 4% of my student body, I still need to address it because they are my congregation. So you want to ask yourself the question, is it worth me addressing? If the headline or the national news or the experience we are finding ourselves in as a nation, as a community, takes away from the theological claim you are attempting to teach, then don't do it. Put it in a prayer. Put it in the liturgy. I had to ask myself the question, how many sermons did I preach in 2020 without saying the word COVID? Was it necessary to bring it up every time? Because are we not, some of us, looking for an escape from it? I had to ask myself that. Here we were, right? In 2021. Was it necessary to mention what happened at the Capitol? Do we have to bring up racism in every sermon? These are questions I'm just saying that we need to ask ourselves. At this point, I'm sure every preacher is going to be talking about that young Black poet, right? They're going to be talking about the hill, we have to climb. They're going to be bringing it up. It's going to be a series. And while I'm here being good and petty and shady, I want to talk about how she had them Delta colors on. Now, that's neither here nor there, but you get what I'm saying? So we have to start asking ourselves, are these subject matters worth us addressing them? Bringing it up? Will it be a stumbling block for anybody? How do we approach it and address it? I'm going to move to how we meet the needs of multi-generational people. We use every avenue of communication we can. We got some who need conference call. We got some who need Zoom. We got some who just need a link on the website. We need to send emails out to people with the content who may not be able to view it. We want to make sure we have replays available. We don't want to just direct people to the website. We want to have a mass text message go out to our church members that has the link for people to engage. We want to send out surveys directly to people. We want to show up in ways that we've never shown up before. We don't want to just mail a kit of communion. We want to drop it off to you individually. We want our deacons to assist with dropping, and deaconesses helping with dropping it off. And so being able to reach various generations requires work, and I mean teamwork. One person cannot do it. Before, people used to look down on children's and youth pastors, but the truth is, we need them. We need persons who are targeted for particular demographics and persons in our generations in our congregation, whether that be our senior saints or our adults or our singles, ways in which that we make the most impact. The language I use are affinity groups. So, when I was a young adult pastor, I used to have to separate. I'm dealing with singles. I'm dealing with those who are married. I'm dealing with those who went to HBCUs, those who didn't go to college, those who like to do physical activity. So being able to start breaking down different affinity groups and times in which those groups can connect will help us reach different generations. Being able to say, the singles group will meet this time, this support group is over here, this type of Bible study is over here. Being able to offer various Bible studies and remembering that we're not doing it by ourselves. Who's on our ministerial staff that we can bring in on our team, that we can bring in to assist us with the ways in which we engage ministry and do the things that we're attempting to do. That is about all that I really want to share. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? And while you all are doing that, I thought I had, there we go. I have a bibliography that I'll share with you with some of the resources I use. But any questions, comments, or concerns for our workshop and our time together? I thought 45 minutes. I did it. It's 11:48 Eastern time. Any questions, comments, concerns? If so, go ahead and drop them in the chat so that we can just address them directly. Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. That's right, Pastor Lowe, we cannot do it all. And I think it's arrogant for us to think that we can, or even pretend that we can. And I think that most times we try to do it all out of fear. What will people say? What will people think? Will I lose influence? Will I lose people? And and Dr. Mitchell, he started pastoring a new congregation in the pandemic. So establishing pastoral authority sometimes makes you think you still have to do it by yourself. But I have learned in my executive pastor role that when you start to engage people and let them know you trust them with their work ethic and their leadership, it gives you more pastoral authority. When you start to engage them and let them know, I trust you. And you know what else? And I'm giving you space, even if you mess up, I got your back. That changes the way people engage you as pastor and leader and are invested in the growth of the ministry. I believe Dr. Zachary has a question. I'm just going to make sure I covered it. Preaching that connects to multi-generations and engages them to further mature in Christ. Yeah, I think how was your experience? How has your experience been preaching and engaging your students virtually? To be very honest with you, Dr. Mitchell, it has been, I think because of my skill set, my transition to online ministry went really well at Wiley College. I have a campus ministry e-board and a campus ministry organization. And for those who might pay any attention to Wiley College, the truth of the matter is that religious life kept rolling. Literally kept moving, kept pushing, and we set the paradigm for how other departments were going to do ministry. And so what I found preaching for my students, it's different for the Sunday morning sermons because those sermons are 15 to 20 minutes, which really I learned probably still work for Sunday mornings because people just want to hear the word. And so the difficulty that I have had is the follow-up because there's so many platforms that they tweet and share, or they're on TikTok, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat. So my follow-up has been difficult. So what I have done is that I have assigned students to be moderators in different chats to help me to engage persons and get me the information I need to follow a persons personally if I need to. One of the most difficult things I've experienced is actually offering people Christ. Once I pray with you and you get saved, then being able to pull you into a space for discipleship as you grow in Christ, those new believers, that's been one of my most recent projects. And I know many churches are figuring it out too. How do you baptize virtually? How do you bring new members in virtually? Because now, people have multiple memberships across several churches these days. And so doing it virtually has been a blessed challenge. Actually doing ministry online with them has been much easier than teaching them online. They have had difficulties staying up to date with assignments and deadlines. And I have to admit, being a student online myself in this PhD program, it has been challenging to remember assignments and deadlines, posting and engaging. You get exhausted, and so you need a break from screen time. And so learning to incorporate Sabbath into our pedagogy and our preaching might be helpful for individuals. Pastor Lowe, my goal is to use the gifts God has given to the church, which includes the people. Absolutely. And I think this would be a good time to do a spiritual gift assessment of your membership. And when you learn what their gifts are, plugging them into places to help you. We know that the younger generation is a little bit more savvy with online engagement and social media technology. Why not use them? Give them Canva, a free online to be able to help you do flyers. I think what's helpful now is being able to market your message before it airs, right? Because now you start to see people engage you before the sermon even takes place, and you've built a community and a base to be able to engage. And so using young people employing and engaging people to say, would you please share this in advance? Would you please tweet this? Asking them for ways to name, your sermon. One of my most recent sermons is called "It's the Yet for Me," which is a part of our cultural sayings. And I'm really working on a sermon now called "Nah, That Ain't It." And so being able to take the language of the day, applying it to our preaching really is helpful. And let me tell you, a universal language is that of music. Pastor Zacharias, being able to take the hymns, contemporary song, and show people how they are actually saying the same thing really helps us to build a better community. And then playing that theme music kind of as the intro and outro of your church service is a little helpful too, because they're like, oh, I think I heard that. So being able to work that way, and giving your musicians a little freedom to work it into some of the praise and worship while they're doing some things. Any other questions or comments or concerns, please let me know. Thank you, Pastor Sally. Awesome information and tools. Thank you. Any other questions? Let me tell you a couple people that you can look up that have helped me with digital footprint stuff. Oh, this is the other thing. Oh, I told y'all, getting young people. I have social media interns that young people that are connected to different churches who will help manage your social media. Thank you so much, Maria Newton Taban. Here's some people that helped me. His name is Bobby Hampton. He is based in Chicago. He has done flyers for me, graphics for me, websites for me. He's done flyers and graphics for a fellowship church with Pastor Reverend Sharp as the pastor. His name is Justin Haywick. He's based in Atlanta. He's done my website. He does an amazing job. Another young lady, her name is Jessica Crystal James. She helps with online base management within the AIM Zion Church. I know you all probably already know that these people are available to other churches as well. You got Baja Parker, you got Darren Kent, you got Crystal Bailey, you got Tremaine Miller. Obviously, LaKesha Womack has been doing, almost cuss, but for real, she's been doing the damn thing. We have to make her. We have to vote her in as a general officer. She has shown the church how you do this and do it well. Another person, his name is Claude Hamilton. He does amazing work with photography and pictures and images. Ty, Brianna Harris, and Janae Hunter are willing to serve as social media interns for churches. So listen, if you need someone to do a particular project, hit me up, because I'm telling you, I've been so grateful for relationships. Alyssa Lewis out of Portland, Maine, has done all the videography of every chapel service at Wiley College. So what I'm going to do is put my email address in the comment section so that you all can have it. If you have any questions about who you can get to do, whether it's graphics or digital footprint, whether it's a website, or somebody to even manage your Zoom account while you're teaching, somebody to do the muting people and highlighting people, pinning the pictures. We got people that you can certainly help them make sure that they do. With that, my brothers and my sisters, that totally concludes my iHomiletic workshop. I pray that there's something we said or did that blesses you, that encourages you, to let you know that you can continue doing ministry in excellence, even in this, even in the midst of this pandemic. And so let me put my contact information also on the screen. There you go. So yes, there is some information. Contact me if you need to. Let me know what I can do for you. There are people who are also available to be your virtual assistant. Listen, and hear me when I tell you, it don't cost a lot of money. We are in a season where bartering and exchanging services is blessing people. I'm going to linger for 4 minutes before y'all move to your next session. If anybody has any final questions, comments, or concerns, but thank you all for joining me. Have an amazing, amazing day. Peace and blessings.